speak to you on the occasion of your 3rd anniversary of becoming a Reconciling Ministry. You and the churches in the network of which you are a part are a model for all communities, for all people, of what it means to love and care for one another, as Jesus does. That you lead with your inclusion statement and everything you do so clearly says that you intend as a body to live out the love of God inspires my heart so. And to live out the teachings of Christ, that we must love one another unconditionally, everyone welcome and worthy. Amen. In the book of Matthew, it's written that the voice of God will say, "You are worthy of my kingdom because when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was a stranger, you took me in. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was sick, you visited me. When I was in prison, you came unto me." And when asked, "When, Lord, did we do this for you? When did you come to us hungry? When did you come to us thirsty, a stranger, naked, sick, imprisoned? When, Lord?" In reply, "Inasmuch as you have done this for each of my brothers and sisters, you have done this unto me." It does not say, "But if I was gay, pass me by," or "If I was homeless, you must step over me." It does not say, "If I was an addict, let me waste away." It does not say, "If I was transgender, shun me." Or "If I was a different race than you, make sure you don't get too close." Or "if," or "except when." No. This word teaches us that if we do our godly work with unconditional love, we will not miss the blessing intended for us through establishing the beloved community. It is a blessing for all of us to be the beloved community. And it is all of us, or it is not the beloved community. This is our sacred charge. Yes, to care for one another, really care for one another in full awareness that each individual is sacred. No matter what their life expression looks like, everyone a child of God, worthy to be loved just as they are. You know, our true identity, whether we remember it or not, in the moment is a divine expression of the one life that is God. There is one life, God's life, and we are blessed to be participating in it. Yes? Every one of us comes into this life desired into existence by God. Do we believe that? Our job then is to love and care for God's creations and one another as God's creations. We must embrace and affirm heart to heart that each of us belongs. This form of sacred companionship, when we're held in community, we can be free to be who God intended us to be. Our authentic selfhood just unfolds through grace. There's a beautiful poem by the Persian poet and mystic Hafiz that says so beautifully this. It's called, "If God invited you to a party." If God invited you to a party and said, "Everyone in the ballroom tonight will be my special guest," How would you treat them when you arrived? Everyone in the ballroom is God's special guest. How do you treat them when you arrive? Hafiz would always speak. Hafiz knows there is no one in this world who is not dancing upon God's jeweled dance floor. Everyone is invited. Is this on also? No. I come before you today to offer a reflection on my journey and to tell my story about how my life as a servant of God, as a minister, as a lesbian, as a wife, and a daughter became reconciled through the love of God. So as I was working on coming to speak to you today, I thought it would be good, since it's a story about my mother and I, that I call my mother and make sure I have permission to talk about our story. So yesterday I call her. I've been working on this. I knew I was going to get permission or I wouldn't have waited so long. So I call her and I tell her why I'm calling. I said, well, I'm speaking at this beautiful church. They've invited me and they're, honoring the LGBTQ community and all people. And I'm speaking and I'd like to speak on our journey. And she says, you're kidding me, right? And I thought, uh-oh, I don't have permission. She doesn't want me to talk about this. But now she says, have you been talking to your sisters? I said, no, why? She says to me, well, let me tell you how God works. She says, last Sunday, I went to my pastor and I told him, I am feeling moved by Spirit to tell the story of how I reconciled with my daughter. This is how God works. I wouldn't make this up. She said, I feel that, her heart was aching for parents and children who were not communicating, who were leaving each other's lives over discovering or being told that their child was gay and not being accepted. And she said, I think people need to hear my story. I'd like to speak to the congregation. So her pastor happily said, that is a great idea and we're going to set it up right away. I'm no longer surprised by what God does, but I'm always in awe of it. I just kind of stood there like, say what? So she says, all this past week I've been working on my talk. I said, well, I've been working on my talk. So we've both been doing this same thing, heart to heart, from New York to California. It's amazing, amazing. So on to my story. When I was growing up, my mother said, I don't remember this, but my mother said I was a sweet child, a darling child. And then around, the self-discovery years, the dating years, I started acting out. She said I acted out like no child of hers. And we struggled bitterly. And our relationship became more and more strained. And it was bad. I was cutting school. I was running away from home. I was hanging out with people that my mother says, that just doesn't make sense. Who are those people? I was acting out. I mean, more so than just the usual teenager acting out. She said, I didn't know you. I didn't know who you were. She kept thinking, what is wrong with this child? And she said, after some time, some wisdom came to her heart, and she thought, there must be something on her heart that she can't share. Now that was wise. Something that she can't share with me. I'm just going to support her. So, I've been blessed. My mother and I have a fantastic relationship, but it had its moments for sure. I tested every nerve my mother had. But we always trust that God would guide us. Underneath all of that. I wouldn't say that we stood there together and said, God will guide us. I can't say that. But I know that in both of our hearts, we knew that. So what shall I do? Okay. So when she discovered that I was gay, which means I didn't come out willingly, she was so not pleased, and thank you. She said she wanted a normal life for me. She wanted a normal life for her daughter, and she would have used the words a natural life. And as time went on, and then I grew into adulthood, and I moved out, I got my own place. We remained connected, but there was a part of my life that I couldn't share with my mother. How sad is that? Because she was struggling with reconciling what she had been told through church doctrine and what she was witnessing as her beloved daughter. So the part I want to get really real about with you is that I was also struggling at the same time with what church doctrine was saying about me as a lesbian. And what I knew was true about me, that I was a child of God. But the connection to the true voice of authority remained strong in me, and I believe in my mother. Both she and I walk very intimately with God. We're always in dialogue and prayer with God, and we may have different words and different names that we use and different approaches to prayer life, but we both know there is one God, and we meet right there. So one day years ago, I was having another discussion with my mother about my life expression and her desire for me to change and be what she thought would save me. And all I could hear was change. Accept the church doctrine that says you're not worthy until you change, and God will love you. You can come home to God. That's what I could hear her saying. And all I kept saying was, I don't want to be part of anything that denies my sacred nature. I do not want to be somewhere where I'm not honored for who I am. You don't see me for who I am. You don't appreciate and honor me for who I am. These conversations were quite painful for quite some time, but always we stayed with each other, trying to understand one another so we could restore the harmony that we knew was our true relationship. We kept trusting that love could overcome the conflict. Maybe at times she was trusting love would overcome it and I would change. And I was thinking love's going to overcome this and she will change. Certainly not the right view. We were young. Sometimes we were very distant, but we were always tethered by love. So then one day, something shifted in me. And we all know that something is another name for spirit, right? Something shifted in me. You see, every day I examine myself. And I check my faith. I search my soul. And I check for discrepancies with what I profess I believe and my actions. I believe that God is all in all. I live and move and have my being in God, and that everything emanates from God, including me, including you. I believe that. And what I know is that God does not make mistakes, nor does God create disposable people. Amen? Therefore, this is reasoning and spirit together for me. Therefore, this daughter of God, a lesbian, is sacred and of God. Both true, reconciled. I thank God for that. This day I was particularly receptive, and the shift unfolded into a piece of acceptance of myself just as I was, created in the image and likeness. And as I stood in my power, in the knowledge of myself as a gift of God, the conversations began to change. So I felt movement in my heart. And I heard my mother's words in a new way. She was saying the same thing. Not what I heard, but what she was truly saying. I heard, I'm so grateful, I heard, I love you. All I know, this is my mother speaking, all I know is that the astounding love and infinite compassion that I know as Jesus is what I want for you. That's a very different conversation. I love you so much that I want for you what I have. I was overcome with humility and a wave of divine love. What more could I want but to be wished divine love and infinite compassion? Well, I had the wisdom to express that to her, that I had shifted how I heard what she was saying, and that took everything to a whole nother level of love. As I'm doing this, she sees me for who I really am, because I'm finally being who I really am, and hearing with the ears of God. Yes? I am standing knowing I am a gift of God. Makes all the difference. So we need to affirm one another. Always affirm one another, because while I was lucky that I had been graced with a certain level of peace and faith and devotion in my household so that I could find my way to a spiritual, deep connection with the one God, there are lots of people who don't have that environment to come to knowing the divinity of themselves. We must affirm one another, always. Never assume people know how good they are. So when I talked to her yesterday, I asked her, do you have any wisdom I can share with this congregation about our journey together? And she said, I'm going to imitate my mother now. She said, we just need to love like Jesus and pray, because God answers prayer. She said, people have to understand that it is not on the other person to change. It is on us to have a change of heart. It is for us to love unconditionally and remove anything in our own hearts that keeps us from that. She is amazing. So we're pushing no one away and honoring the sacred in everyone and staying with them until the shift happens. That is key. And when we see that shift, we will improve upon our own understanding of what divine love is. One of my personal heroes, Howard Thurman, an inspired theologian, philosopher, poet, and mystic, writes in his book, Disciplines of the Spirit, and I paraphrase, we cannot be in a hurry in matters of the heart. The human spirit is to be explored gently and with unhurried tenderness. At first, for most of us, this skill in tarrying with another has to be cultivated through much self-discipline. At first, it may seem mechanical, artificial, but this kind of clumsiness will not remain if we persist. He goes on to say how indescribably wonderful and healing it is to encounter another human being who not only listens to our words, but listens to us. Everyone needs this and needs to give it as well. Thus we come full circle in love. I love my mother, and she has taught me how to be a woman of God through her example. My mother is preparing herself to share her story so that she can love like Jesus does and give others an example from their own church community of how to tarry together, to shift, to grow, and heal through unconditional love. The Spirit has moved her to do this, and I think she will not rest until she has complied. And that's really what I wanted to say to you today. So I will close with this from Howard Thurman. To love is to make of one's heart a swinging door. May our hearts be ever open, and may we tarry together long enough to see God in the other. Amen.